الله الرحمن الرحيم القارية ما القارية وما أدراك ما القارية يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث وتكون الجبال كالعهن المنفوش فأما من ثقلت وموازينه فهو في عيشة راضية وأما من خفت موازينه فأمه هاوية وما أدراك
ما هي حامية صدق الله
العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Okay. بسم
الله الرحمن الرحيم والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر ألم تر ففعل ربك بعاد إرم ذات العماد التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد وفرعون ذي الأوتاد الذين طغوا في البلاد فأكثروا فيها الفساد فصب عليهم رب صوت عذاب إن ربك لبالمرصاد فأما الإنسان إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانن يقول يا ليتني لا تكرمون اليتيم ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين وتأكلون التراث أكلا لما وتحبون المال حبا جما كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا وجاء ربك والملك صفا صفا وجيء يومئذ بجهنم يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له الذكرى يقول يا ليتني قدمت لحياتي فيومئذ لا يعذب عذابه أحد ولا يوثق وثاقه أحد يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Inshallah, we'll proceed with the lecture by our respected scholar, Sheikh Mahdi. Please welcome him with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وعجل فرجهم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة على رسول الله وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه المنتجبين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. Dearest brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your acts of worship in this blessed month of Ramadan. And again, we extend our condolences as we draw near to the martyrdom anniversary of the commander of the faithful, Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. Inshallah, we'll continue with our reading and study of letter 31 of Nahj al-Balagha. As we stated last night, this is a document. It is a will that the Imam writes, and his purpose for writing this letter, as we stated last night, is to communicate certain truths to his son And because he has come to a point in his life where he feels like it's important for him to document these so that they remain for his son, whether his father remain alongside him, whether his father is to pass. And again, we said one of the main things that the Imam is doing in introducing himself and then introducing his son, that was the first section that we went over last night, is to try and normalize difficult conversations that are centered on death. We said it's difficult because we don't really want to come to terms with the reality that we will die, our loved ones will die, and some of those thoughts, some of those messages, it's difficult for us to speak about them because they're so closely linked with those emotions. But of course, the Imam is using this opportunity to kind of push past all of this, and is teaching us that we also need to take initiative when doing that. And he spoke about a son and about a younger individual that obviously is a completely different place in their life compared to a seasoned and aged father. And because of that is in a vulnerable position, and a position that they are impressionable. They need direction. They need guidance. And one of the things that Imam Ali mentioned in our presentation last night, and we'll continue because that's the second section of the Imam providing the kind of the initial instructions and admonitions, drawing on this idea that you need that guidance. If I, as a father, don't provide those things for you, then you're surrounded by a world that is full of difficulty, full of pain, full of diversions, and you may find yourself engaging in a life that is really deceptions. So in the second section, the Imam then transitions. Now reading, says, أما بعد فإن فيما تبينت من إدبار الدنيا عني وجموه الدهر علي وإقبال الآخرة إلي ما يزعني عن ذكر ما سواي والاهتمام بما ورائي غير أني حيث تفرد بي دون هموم الناس هم نفسي. So the Imam says that in introducing myself and introducing you as a recipient, allow me to explain why I'm writing this. He said, among the things that I've learned, I've ascertained from the retreat from the temporal world and the assault of time again means the life lessons that I've learned, and the advance of the hereafter, the nearing of my transition from this world to the left. All of these things are realities that prevent me from thinking of anyone but myself and worrying about anything beyond my affairs. Okay, let's just pause here real quick. Imam here saying that this document, this admonition, is grown out of what we may call a soul searching. Again, for a moment, let's bracket what we know as Imam Ali alayhi salam as Imam, as a divine guide, a divinely appointed guide on earth. Let's bracket that for a moment and approach this document with the wisdom that's there, of course, but how a father is communicating to his son, a mother to, or a parent to their child. It says, what I've learned from my life at this moment, and as I'm kind of preparing for death, is that I have to start thinking about myself. One of the things that we forget to do in the pursuit of so many things in life, many of them are virtuous, is that we forget ourselves and we forget the bigger picture. And as a result of that, we forget to take care of ourselves. Sometimes even in the pursuit of religious ideals, we remove ourselves from the equation. Now, that may have, in some respect, that may be good. A person may want to practice, selflessness. They want to practice zuhd, all these things which will come very shortly. But when, not even excessively, but when it's misdirected, an individual ends up forgetting about those things that are really important for their own life and afterlife. So a father, a mother, a parent is focused on what? Is focused on providing for their children. That's a natural feeling that a parent has. They want the best for their children. So that becomes kind of like the guiding principle that informs everything that they do in life, or at least they're reminded of that from time to time. But in pursuit of some of those things, how we understand being the service of our children, being at the service of a larger cause, those may become a little bit misguided. And we may be putting ourselves in positions of working and running running and chasing things that ultimately are not conducive to the building of the self and the building of the other. So in kind of like these, they're not final moments in a historical sense, but the Imam's drawing closer to his death. He's kind of challenging us, and I think it's appropriate on nights like these that we are, observing the nights of Qadr, right? Nights of decree, the nights of value. What is it that in life that we're striving for? And you can break it down for yourself. You can start a very big picture, but break it down into some particulars too. And think about, to that extent, how much have you worked on those things which are important to you as a person? Have you gone through those stages of development too? Have you ensured that your children are learning through the example that you've set? And the example that you set is not just in the providing of resource and opportunity. It's a portion of it. But also in the translation of that in your own life and in your own kind of like example. So it's not just that, well, I want my children to be better than me, so it would be a great success for them to be more successful than I am. That's fine. But you don't want there to be such a huge gap and discrepancy that you as a person don't become a point of reference anymore for your children. So he says, in that clarity, I'm starting to think about myself. And he says then, إني حيث تفرد من دونهن الناس هم نفسي فصدفني رأيي وصرفني عن هواي وصرح لي محض أمري. So in that place, فأفضى بي إلى جد لا يكون فيه لعب وصدق لا يشوبه كذب. So as I stand face to face with my worries, not the worries of others, not the worries that society has imposed upon me. This is me thinking about the things that I value. And my mind speaks to me truthfully and diverts me away from my desires. So in this practice that I've done of clearing my soul and clearing my mind, I know that it's not the pressures of others, the pressures of society that's driving my intention, that's driving my thought. I don't want to say it's removed from emotion, because I think that's inaccurate. Here is saying my mind. It's not saying that it's completely devoid of any emotion. What it's saying is that there's a clarity of thought. And at the very core of my concerns becomes manifest and draws me into a state of seriousness untainted by jest and honesty untainted by lies. Here, in the purest form of thinking about myself, here the Imam says that وَوَجَدْتُكَ بَعْدِي بَلْ وَجَدْتُكَ كُلِّي. I found you as a part of myself. Rather, I found you are all of me. So in that soul searching, Imam Ali as a father said, I found you as my son there, kind of in the purest forms of myself. You were not just a part of me, but you were me fully. And then he says, a natural result of that then is, لو أصابك أصابني. Anything that befalls me afflicts you, afflicts me. So again, we are both almost like one person, one reality, one being in two bodies. وَكَأَنَّ الْمَوْتَ لَوْ أَتَاكَ أَتَانِي. It's as if death visited you, it would be visiting me. So because of that, فَعَنَانِي مِنْ أَمْرِكَ مَا يَعْنِينِي مِنْ أَمْرِ نَفْسِي. So in this soul searching that I'm preparing myself to transition to the next life, your affairs concern me as my own affairs. And because of that, فَكَتَبْتُ إِلَيْكَ كِتَابِي هَذَا. Because of that, I'm writing you this letter. مُسْتَظْهِرًا بِهِ إِنْ أَنَا بَقِيتُ لَكَ أَوْ فَنِيتُ. And depend on it, this letter, as a guide, whether I remain with you or not. So think of this is such a powerful kind of thought that the Imam is saying, in the purest searching of myself, I found you, and I found you fully. And because I am preparing myself for this transition from the temporal life to the hereafter, and I continue to care about you because it's caring about myself, there's going to be a gap. There's going to be some form of a disconnect between us. I will be unavailable for you to provide that guidance, that assurance, that support as a father. So I wanted something to remain with you, as if I am speaking to you through this document. See, this is a father that's, first of all, not only very intentional in his commitment to his children. Remember, in just a few statements ago, he says, the state of mind that I'm in is one that's untainted by jest. It's untainted by lies, right? Our emotions fluctuate from time to time, and because of that, we show love, and then we may not show affection for children. We may care for them, we may abandon them. We may acknowledge them, we may neglect them. These are fluctuations that happen in life. But here the Imam is saying that no, all of those things aside, this is where I found you. And I don't want to leave you now. So before we go into the admonitions, this right here is so crucial. In what state have you found the value of your children? Right? So this can be a part of a larger conversation about, why people have children and the relationship that they enjoy with their children and what their children mean to them. Is it a means for, economic prosperity? Is it mean for status? Is it a mean? Because the Quran speaks about all of these things. So some people, the only utility of their children is to bring status to them. So the Imam says, I'm not thinking in those terms, because those are lies. This is an honesty that's not tainted by that. So when we say status, it can mean all sorts of different things, but for the most part, it's culturally defined. My son or my daughter enjoys these sort of successes. Great. But is that the nature of the relationship with your child? Which means that if they don't enjoy those things, do you see them differently? Do you care for them differently? It could be, again, economic prosperity. It could be the power that they hold. So that's the first thing. In these nights, think about really the nature of the relationship that we have with our children. And the second thing is, really, do we find that our success is the success of our children? And is the success of our children our success too? Everyone will just, again, the reaction naturally will say yes to both of those questions. But if it was that simple, the Imam looks like he's having a very pure moment in expressing this. He's come to a realization that seems to be incredibly invaluable. He's not just saying something as a parent says, I love my child and I want for my child what I want for myself. That's not what he's saying here. He's saying something more. But in any effect, even if we take it at a more basic level, the success of our children is our success. The joy and happiness of our children is our joy. And thinking about one generation after another, what are these documents that we're leaving for our children and the generations to come that allows them to navigate the world, whether we be alongside them or not? Now, this is at a personal level, it can happen, at a family level, it can happen. Like I said, it can be incorporated as a part of your actual will that you write. These are the principles that govern our family life as Muslims. Your child can keep something like this in the family. When circumstances change, when you're no longer around, they can say, this family, the Husseini family, the Alawi family, the Rizvi, whatever, this family is governed by these principles. And they almost, there's a sanctity that finds. But also in the larger scheme, in a community sense, what are those things that we are producing that become guidance and guidelines for future generations to come? I like to speak of this in terms of institution building, right? A document, something that unless it's destroyed, won't perish, it remains. So whether you're here or not, that document remains and it becomes a source of inspiration for others, so long as they have access to that and engage with it. Some of the work that we do is not thinking ahead beyond our own lives. We may create wonderful things, but they're tied to us. And once we transition, those things also will they don't transition, they will slowly begin to deteriorate, decay, and then completely fall apart. So in thinking about kind of like providing guidance for our youth, in this Layali al-Qadr, think at least a portion of the night about this. What am I and what is my generation collectively leaving as guidance, not just maybe in the form of documentation, but in practices, in institutions, in cultures, that ensures that they can continue to draw from that as they move forward and they make progress because of it. And that their action, their results becomes a reflection of me. It is just as important to me how they're living 10 years, 15, 20 years after I die, and also 3-4 generations after, because I see myself connected to kind of the work and the life that they're living. That requires much more thought, and it requires an intentionality of how we approach life. If it's not just about the immediate, and it's not just about one generation after, how would it change if we are tasked with setting up the future for multiple generations to go? Would there not be a little bit more urgency? Would that not help tame some of our inefficiencies and our behavioral faults for the greater good? When you think in the moment, those small things are enhanced. They occupy our mind and consciousness because we're focusing on something so small. When we look at the bigger picture, the minutia is really not as important. So I really wanted to highlight that, and I wasn't planning on spending all this time, but it would be such a loss for us to, read this document, study this document, and think, okay, well, these are platitudes. The Imam is saying what any of us would say. No, he's saying something, having fully realized it, And again, like I said, his expression here is not from a divinely inspired and educated imam. This is a father who has gone through the process of life with an open mind and is learning from his life experiences. And he's communicating that in this document right now for his children. So then what does he say? So I'm beginning to admonish you now in this state, in this context. فَإِنِّي أُوصِيكَ بِتَقْوَى اللَّهِ أَيْ بُنَيَّ وَلُزُومِ أَمْرِهِ. So the first thing, obviously, and these are kind of like the fundamental admonishments that the Imam gives, and everything that follows after that is really founded on these, based on these. Imam says that what I admonish you, my dearest son, first is taqwa Allah. So we've spoken about, and we are familiar with the concept of taqwa as being something more than just a fear of God. It's a consciousness of God as the reality and what God invites us to be in our lives. So this is how I always explain it to my younger students. I say, do you know someone who's unconscious? What does that mean? So, well, someone who's unconscious means they can't see people or hear things. And I ask them, are they alive? So yeah, an unconscious person is alive, but they're not perceptive. They don't know what's going on around them, or they do, and either medically I'm uninformed, or we're still kind of figuring that out. But the person's alive, they're just not conscious and perceptive of what's going on around them. So this God consciousness that we speak about in one of the kind of renderings of taqwa, is that a person is not just alive, but they are conscious of what is happening around them, and they are responding and reacting to that. Right? God consciousness. So a Muslim is not looking for God somewhere. Muslim is observing the signs of God. And signs of God is not just God's majesty, but it's also the instruction, the direction. God is saying, go this way. So a person who's God conscious, if they come to at a fork in the road, one sign is saying, God is saying, go right. And the other one's saying, God is saying, don't go left. Just like how the clear instruction Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Adam alayhi salam. Go anywhere you want, don't go to this tree. Person who's conscious says, oh, okay, great, I'm going to go to the right. Person who is not God conscious is completely oblivious to the fact that there are signs, or that there even is a fork in the road. They just continue straight. Or they just happen to go right, or they decide to go left. So have taqwa. Kind of live life consciously of what's happening. So that's number one. And the month of Ramadan obviously is an exercise in intensifying this taqwa, this consciousness that we have. وَلُزُومِ أَمْرِهِ. And naturally, a result of that is for you to abide by the commandments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given. وَعِمَارَةِ قَلْبِكَ بِذِكْرِهِ. Imara is like a building. Build your heart. Allow your heart to be founded on the remembrance of God. وَالْإِعْتِصَامَ بِحَبْلِهِ. And hold firm to the rope of God, to the lifeline of God. وَأَيُّ سَبَبٍ أَوْثَقُ مِنْ سَبَبِ بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَ اللَّهِ إِنْ أَنْتَ أَخَذْتَ بِهِ. And what bond can be more tenacious than the bond between you and God, granted that you grab hold of it. So again, all of that is to say the same thing, that your direction in life is provided already by God. It's not even that you have to search for it. It's made available to you. Just remember to stick with it. That's it. Because there are going to be other options. There's going to be other alternatives that are presented to you along the way. And you may be enticed to abandon this one or to grab hold of the other one. Or if you're really smart, you think that you can hold on to both and make the best of both worlds. Ultimately, they're going to go in different directions. You're going to have to make a choice. So for his son is saying, listen, this consciousness, this relationship with God, this bond, and this lifeline of God, that is the key to success. If you're looking for happiness, felicity in this life and the hereafter, don't let go of that. So we're already kind of about half an hour in. I wanted to kind of finish this section. And perhaps I'll just, pause here so we don't go over time. I want to be respectful of time. But inshallah, what we'll do tomorrow night is that we'll continue in this second section that the Imam gives the initial instructions. And then from there, we'll do a quick recap. And then we'll begin to those pointed admonitions that Imam gives in each section. Like I said, we can break the letter up into 30-odd sections, less, more, depending on how we decide to characterize things. But each of those, I hope that at least we can take one or two very practical lessons away in the nights that do remain. And from there, inshallah, we can use those, like I said, not only as good things to learn, but again, a directed way of us as parents or even as children, as we're listening, to use that as a model of parenting and a model of building a roadmap for how to improve the situation of this generation, but also the next generation and many, many generations to follow, inshallah. And I think that's really what's most powerful about this letter. So we hope to do that in the nights that follow, inshallah. So recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. So let's recite just a few minutes of musibah, remembering the Imam in the day and the night that follows after he's struck by the accursed Muljim. Assalamu alayka ya amin Allahi fi ardih wa hujjatahu ala ibadih. Assalamu alayka ya amir al-mu'mineen. أشهد أنك جاهدت في الله حق جهاده وعملت بكتابه واتبعت سنن نبيه صلى الله عليه وآله حتى دعاك الله إلى جواره فقبضك إليه باختياره وألزم أعداءك الحجة مع ما لك من الحجج البالغة على جميع خلقه. It's narrated that when Amir al-Mu'mineen was struck, لما ضرب أمير المؤمنين عليه الصلاة والسلام الضربة التي كانت وفاته فيها, that his martyrdom would follow as a result of that. اجتمع إليه الناس بباب القصر, that the people rushed to the door and wanted to, وكان يراد قتل ابن ملجم, they wanted to, bring justice to Ibn Muljam that struck the Imam لعنة فخرج الحسن عليه السلام. Imam al-Hasan عليه السلام came out فقال معاشر الناس إن أبي أوصاني أن أترك أمره إلى وفاته. He says, my father is instructed to leave this matter until his death. فإن كان له الوفاة, if he was to die, so be it. وإلا نذر هو في حقه فانصرفوا يرحمكم الله. And if he remains alive, allow him to take care of the affair himself. May Allah have mercy on all of you. Then the narrator says, قال فانصرف الناس ولن أنصرف. The narrator Asbagh ibn Nubatah says, all the people left, but I didn't leave. فخرج ثانية وقال لي يا أسبغ. Again, the Imam came out and said, يا أسبغ أما سمعت قولي أن قول أمير المؤمنين. Didn't you hear the message that I relayed from the commander of the faithful? قلت بلى. Says, yes, of course I heard. ولكني رأيت حاله فأحببت أن أنظر إليه فأستمع منه حديثا فاستأذن لي رحمك الله. He says, yes, I heard, but I saw the state and I wanted to continue seeing what would happen, and I wanted you to allow me a visitation. So he said, فقال لي أدخل. He says, come in. فدخلت. Asbagh says, when I entered the house, فإذا أمير المؤمنين عليه الصلاة والسلام مصعب بعصابة وقد علت سفرة وجهه على تلك العصابة. I saw the Imam in a state of of great illness, the Imam in a state of great pain, and the yellowness of his face, the pigmentation of his face was so intense. وَإِذَا هُوَ يَرْفَعُ فَخِذَ وَأَضَعُ أُخْرَى مِنْ شِدَّةِ الضَّرْبَ وَكَثْرَةِ السَّمْ, and the result of the poison that had come. And the Imam then says now, فَقَالَ لِي يَا أَسْبَغْ أَمَا سَمِعْتُ قَوْلَ الْحَسَنِ أَنْ قَوْلِي, didn't you hear the response, the message that was relayed by my son from me? قُلْتُ بَلَى يَا أَمِيرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, yes, of course. وَلَكِنِّي رَأَيْتُ فِي حَالَةٍ فَأَحْبَبْتُ النَّظَرَ إِلَيْكَ. Yes, but I know the state that you're in, and I know these are the final moments. Imam, I just wanted to come and have visitation of you and to see you. وَأَنْ أَسْمَعَ مِنْكَ حَدِيثًا, and to hear from you a hadith, some knowledge. فَقَالَ لِي اقْعُدْ فَمَا أَرَاكَ تَسْمَعُ مِنِّي حَدِيثًا بَعْدَ يَوْمِكَ هَذَا. He says, sit down, Asbagh, and allow me to say what will happen, a hadith that after this you will not hear anymore. Look at this, even in those final moments that the Imam is in such a state. The true Shia, the true lover of Imam, wants to have one final visitation. But also he wants to continue learning from the Imam. اعلم يا أسبغ أني أتيت رسول الله قاعدا كما جئت الساعة فقال يا أبا الحسن أخرج فنادي في الناس الصلاة الجامعة واسعد المنبر وقم دون مقامي بمرقاة وقل للناس ألا من عق والديه فلعنة الله عليه ألا من أبق من مواليه فلعنة الله عليه ألا من ظلم أجيرا أجرته فلعنة الله عليه. Says the Prophet went upon the minbar and delivered these. He says, deliver these to the people, these three things. He says, a person who has been disassociated and has been turned away by their parents and the la'na of God upon them, and a person who abuses their workers and the la'na of Allah upon them, and a person who abuses the ajir, the person who has been taken as a worker, who has rented something for them, the la'na of Allah upon them. Ya Asbagh fa'altu ma amarani, I did what the Prophet had instructed me to do. فقام من أقصى المسجد رجل فقال يا أبا الحسن تكلمت بثلاث كلام وأوجزتهن فاشرحهن لنا فلم أرد جوابا حتى أتيت رسول الله فقلت ما كان من الرجل. So he continues to say that there was questions that were asked of me, and I continued. I didn't provide an answer until the Prophet came to me and provided the answers. So this final moment that the Imam's even in that state, that the Imam is in pain, the Imam is weak, even the companions then were going to Ahlul Bayt and asking for instruction. Two things that I wanted to say in drawing from this account. Number one is that the Imam, even in that state, was still a servant to his people, still a servant to his Shia. And the Imam of our time right now, who though is grieving and in pain because of the state of affairs and the distancing from the Shia, what effort are we making to go to the Imam and ask for his advice? These are those final moments that the Imam is living. The Imam is still in service of his people. How can we think that the Imam of our time that is witnessing what is happening does not care for us, does not love us, and is not awaiting for us to visit him? How alone is the Imam of our time? We're reciting Musibah of Imam Ali, but it's also Musibah, of course, of his children. We're speaking about a father, how he cares for his child. The Imam says, whether I'm alive or not, I feel that pain. So the Musibah of Ali that we're reciting today is also Musibah of Mahdi. That he remains alone, surrounded by some of the purest, but many, though they have the opportunity for visitation, don't use that opportunity. But also the other son of Hussein, in his final moments, didn't have the opportunity for those who loved him to come and bid farewell. Because when Hussein alayhi salam was on the battlefield and he was taking his final breaths, all of those who loved him, his companions, he had watched them already achieve martyrdom and perish. And those who were there of his beloveds, the Ahlul Bayt that remained, could only bid farewell from a distance. That when the Imam was taking his final breaths, he wasn't afforded the opportunity to continue transmitting these wisdoms. Rather, he felt not the company of his ashab, but he felt the weight of that wretched man who sat on the chest of the Imam, and his blessed body felt the weight of the horses that trampled his body and the body of Shuhada after. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. اللهم إنا نسألك وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم إلهي بحق الحسين وحق أمير المؤمنين وحق الحجة يا الله 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 يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك واكفنا يا قاضي الحاجات ويا كافي المهمات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك على كل شيء قدير وصل يا رب على محمد وآله الطاهرين واتم حسين.
یا حسین یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین. وہ عابد بیمار تھا، وہ عابد بیمار تھا، چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا، اور شام کا بازار تھا، اور مصطفیٰ کی بیٹیا مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین. شبیر کی وہ لاڈلی، شبیر کی وہ لاڈلی، سینے پہ جو شاہ کے پلی، جس کی ابا بن میں جلی، منہ پہ تماچوں کے نشاں مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین. وہ زینب و کلثوم تھی، وہ زینب و کلثوم تھی، چادر سے جو محروم تھی، نامحرموں کے درمیان، اور مرتضیٰ کی بیٹیا مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین. وہ باوفا عباس تھا، وہ باوفا عباس تھا، پھوپھیوں کی جو ایک راز تھا، پانی ملا جو نہ پیا، معصوم کا احساس تھا مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین. رو کر کہے قاسم کی ماں، رو کر کہے قاسم کی ماں، مارا گیا قاسم جواں، اے لال میں ڈھونڈ کہاں، مہندی تیری صحرا تیرا مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین. وہ اصغر بے شیر تھا، وہ اصغر بے شیر تھا، اور حرملہ کا تیر تھا، پیاسا گلا کیوں کر کچا، روہی زمین اور آسماں مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین. پیاسے گلے خنجر چلے، پیاسے گلے خنجر چلے، چادر چھنی خیمے جھلے، अब्बास के परचम तले रोती रहे सहदानिया मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन या हुसैन मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम।
الرحيم اللهم إني أفتتح الثناء بحمدك وأنت مسدد للصواب بمنك وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين في موضع العفو والرحمة وأشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنقمة وأعظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة اللهم أذنت لي في دعائك ومسألتك فاسمع يا سميع مدحتي وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي وأقل يا غفور عثرتي فكم يا إلهي من كربة قد فرجتها وهموم قد كشفتها وعثرة قد أقلتها ورحمة قد نشرتها وحلقة بلاء قد فككتها الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا ولم يكن له شريك في الملك ولم يكن له ولي من الذل وكبره تكبيرا الحمد لله بجميع محامده كلها على جميع نعمه كلها الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له في ملكه ولا منازع له في أمره الحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه ولا شبيه له في عظمته الحمد لله الفاشي في الخلق أمره وحمده الظاهر بالكرم مجده الباسط بالجود يداه الذي لا تنقص خزائنه ولا تزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما إنه هو العزيز الوهاب اللهم إني أسألك قليلا من كثير مع حاجة بي إليه عظيما وغناك عنه قديم وهو عندي كثير وهو عليك سهل يسير اللهم إن عفوك عن ذنبي وتجاوزك عن خطيئتي وصفحك عن ظلمي وسترك على قبيح عملي وحلمك عن كثير جرمي عندما كان من خطئي وعمدي أطمعني في أن أسألك ما لا أستوجبه منك الذي رزقتني من رحمتك وأريتني من قدرتك وعرفتني من إجابتك، فصرت أدعوك آمنا وأسألك مستأنسا، لا خائفا ولا وجلا، مدلا عليك فيما قصدت فيه إليك. فإن أبطأ عني عتبت بجهلي عليك، ولعل الذي أبطأ عني هو خير لي لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور. فلم أر مولا كريما أصبر على عبد لئيم منك علي يا رب. إنك تدعوني فأولي عنك، وتتحبب إلي فأتبغض إليك، وتتودد إلي فلا أقبل منك، كأن لي التطول عليك، فلم يمنعك ذلك من الرحمة لي والإحسان إلي والتفضل علي بجودك وكرمك. فارحم عبدك الجاهل وجد عليه بفضل إحسانك، إنك جواد كريم. الحمد لله مالك الملك مجري الفلك مسخر الرياح فالق الإصباح ديان الدين رب العالمين. الحمد لله على حلمه بعد علمه، والحمد لله على عفوه بعد قدرته، والحمد لله على طول أناته في غضبه، وهو قادر على ما يريد. الحمد لله خالق الخلق باسط الرزق فالق الإصباح ذي الجلال والإكرام والفضل والإنعام، الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى، تبارك وتعالى. الحمد لله الذي ليس له منازع يعادله ولا شبيه يشاكله ولا ظهير يعاضده. قهر بعزته الأعزاء وتواضع لعظمته العظماء، فبلغ بقدرته ما يشاء. الحمد لله الذي يجيبني حين أناديه ويستر علي كل عورة وأنا أعصيه، ويعظم النعمة علي فلا أجازي. فكم من موهبة هنيئة قد أعطاني، وعظيمة مخوفة قد كفاني، وبهجة مونقة قد أراني. فأثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا. الحمد لله الذي لا يهتك حجابه ولا يغلق بابه ولا يرد سائله ولا يخيب آمله. الحمد لله الذي يؤمن الخائفين وينجي الصالحين ويرفع المستضعفين ويضع المستكبرين ويهلك ملوكا ويستخلف آخرين. والحمد لله قاصم الجبارين مبير الظالمين مدرك الهاربين نكال الظالمين صريخ المستصرخين موضع حاجات الطالبين معتمد المؤمنين. الحمد لله الذي من خشيته ترعد السماء وسكانها وترجف الأرض وعمارها وتموج البحار ومن يسبح في غمراتها. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. الحمد لله الذي يخلق ولم يخلق ويرزق ولا يرزق ويطعم ولا يطعم ويميت الأحياء ويحيي الموتى وهو حي لا يموت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك أفضل وأحسن وأجمل وأكمل وأزكى وأنمى وأطيب وأطهر وأسنى وأكثر ما صليت وباركت وترحمت وتحننت وسلمت على أحد من عبادك وأنبيائك ورسلك وصفوتك وأهل الكرامة عليك من خلقك. اللهم وصل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم. وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. وصل على صبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. وصل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائمة. اللهم وصل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر وحفه بملائكتك المقربين وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والقائم بدينك استخلفه في الأرض كما استخلفت الذين من قبله. مكن له دينه الذي ارتضيته له أبدله من بعد خوفه أمنا يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا. اللهم أعزه وأعزز به، وانصره وانتصر به، وانصره نصرا عزيزا، وافتح له فتحا يسيرا، واجعل له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. اللهم أظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله، وتذل بها النفاق وأهله، وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك، وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملناه، وما قصرنا عنه فبلغناه. اللهم المم به شعثنا، واشعب به صدعنا، وارتق به فتقنا، وكثر به قلتنا، وأعزز به ذلتنا، وأغن به عائلنا، واقض به عن مغرمنا، واجبر به فقرنا، وسد به خلتنا، ويسر به عسرنا، وبيض به وجوهنا، وفك به أسرنا، وأنجح به طلبتنا، وأنجز به مواعيدنا، واستجب به دعوتنا، وأعطنا به سؤلنا، وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة آمالنا، وأعطنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعطين. اشف به صدورنا، وأذهب به غيظ قلوبنا، واهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك، إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. وانصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق آمين. اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله، وغيبة ولينا، وكثرة عدونا، وقلة عددنا، وشدة الفتن بنا، وتظاهر الزمان علينا. فصل على محمد وآله، وأعنا على ذلك بفتح منك تعجله، وبضر تكشفه، ونصر تعزه، وسلطان حق تظهره، ورحمة منك تجللناها، وعافية منك تلبسناها برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صل على محمد وآله الطاهرين.